So good morning and welcome to our regional webinar today on identification and support for adults that are at risk of harm due to fire. Could I just please ask for everybody, except for our speakers, to turn their cameras off and to keep their microphones on mute throughout the duration of the webinar today, just because of the amount of people, we don't want the system to crash or any technical issues. If people could put their cameras off and their microphones on mute throughout. Could I please ask you also in the chat function to tell us who you are, which agency and which authority you're from? We're going to be using this as a register today, just so we can capture how many people and who's actually here and from what authorities. That'd be really useful. Thank you. So just a little bit of an introduction then. So my name is Kellyanne Perry and I am the Practice Improvement Lead for Walsall Safeguarding Partnership. So this webinar has been organised and is being hosted by Walsall Safeguarding Partnership and Dudley Safeguarding People Partnership. And I've got Lisa Byrne with me today, who is the Learning and Development Coordinator in Dudley. And she's going to be doing lots of work in the background with the Q&As. So welcome, Lisa. As you probably all are all aware that this week is Adult Safeguarding Week, and we thought that this would be a real good ideal opportunity to share with you the findings from the multi-agency audit that's been completed in partnership with West Midlands Fire Service and the Black Country partnerships, which include Walsall, Dudley, Wolverhampton and Sandwell. We've made this a regional event today as we do feel that the learning from the report can be shared much wider than just the Black Country. Okay, so let me just talk you through a little bit of a structure today of what's going to happen. So we're here for the next 2 hours and we've got several speakers with us today. First, we have Michael Wood, who is the Safeguarding Manager for West Midlands Fire Service. And Michael's going to take us through the audit that took place. He's going to look at and talk about the strengths that were identified as part of the audit and the learning and what we can do within our partnerships to support the findings of that audit. We will then hear from Sue Bucking and Beth Curran, who are both Partnership and Vulnerability Support Officers, also from West Midlands Fire Service. Sue and Beth are going to take us through fire prevention in the home to make us all aware of how to identify, assess and promote the safety and well-being of service users who are at risk of fire, fire death or serious injury. They will also take you through some case studies and the learning from those reviews that took place. After each of the presentations, we will have a Q&A session. Due to the amount of people on the call today, we're not going to do it interactively, unfortunately, but what we'd like to do is if you have got a question that you'd like to ask throughout any of the presentations, if you can pop it in the chat function, Lisa will be monitoring and collating the questions and then she will read them out within the Q&A session for the appropriate person to answer. If we do have a lot of questions and we don't have time to address all of them, then we will put together after the session a Q&A sheet that we'll email out to everybody who is with us today. We're also going to be sending out a copy of the presentation and the full audit overview report as well. So you will receive that after the session today. Just to make you aware, the webinar is being recorded, so we will share the link afterwards for those of you that want to share with colleagues. And so the recording will be shared across other partnerships as well. Okay, so I'm now going to hand you over to Michael, who is going to take you through his findings.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to thank you, Kellyanne, for your introduction. I just want to start by introducing myself. I hope you can all hear me. I'm Mike Wood, Safeguarding Manager for West Midlands Fire Service, and I'm the author of the Black Country Fire Audit Overview Report. I'd like to thank Walsall Safeguarding Adults Board for organising this event and for all of the support provided throughout the audits. And thank you to you all as well for coming to today's webinar. It's really great to see so many people here, and I hope that you find it useful. Okay, so my presentation, I'm going to cover four things: the background to the audits, so why we actually conducted them, the audit findings, including sort of strengths, good practice, areas for development and improvement. I'm going to cover the 6 recommendations made as a result of the audits, and I'll talk a bit about next steps. Okay, so I'd like to start with the background to the audits. And there had been an increasing number of adults with care and support needs who died or been seriously injured through fire in the West Midlands Black Country area. And in 2020 to 21, there were 46 incidents that met West Midlands Fire Service's criteria for a serious incident review. And this is our internal process for identifying learning to prevent or reduce the likelihood of similar situations in the future. These incidents resulted in 54 casualties, of which 16 were fatal. And out of those 54 casualties, 37 had care and support needs, which is almost 70%. So this was something that the fire service believed to be important for safeguarding adult boards to be aware of. And this was the background that led to the audits. So the 4 Black Country Safeguarding Adults boards, in partnership with West Midlands Fire Service, carried out multi-agency audits on adults with care and support needs with an associated fire risk. And the audits covered Walsall, Dudley, Wolverhampton and Sandwell. Their aims were to explore whether those individuals could have been better safeguarded and to identify learning to reduce the likelihood of similar circumstances wherever possible in the future. We identified a sample of cases comprised of 12 adults with care and support needs, each with an associated fire risk. And you can see the criteria used to select the cases in the slide. And this was that the adult had been subject to a serious fire incident in the last 12 months, or a safeguarding concern had been raised by the fire service due to fire risk, or a safeguarding concern or care and support assessment had been raised or requested by the fire service in relation to self-neglect. The audit process involved agencies reviewing their relevant case files in each case unless they had no record of the adult. And agencies also involved their practitioners. A multi-agency panel met in June to analyse the records and the findings of each agency. And on the slide, you can see the range of organisations that took part, including social care, NHS organisations and emergency services. And the panel rated each case as either outstanding, good, requires improvement or inadequate. And in this slide is just really to share you the key lines of inquiry that were used in the audits. I won't read through them, but you can see that we were not only interested in fire risks, but also in, for example, the application of the Mental Capacity Act, making safeguarding personal, multi-agency working and information sharing. Okay, so moving on to the learning from the audits, this slide shows the overall ratings that the panel gave to each audit. There were 3 cases where the panel couldn't agree a rating, for example, because there was insufficient information. But you can see that the panel identified good practice and strengths in the audits in each local authority area. It's also worth adding that no cases were rated as inadequate. So the audits identified some recurring strengths and good practice. And this is really important because it provides a foundation for learning and further practice development. The themes, the good practice themes were that the mental capacity assessment was considered and applied in 5 cases. For example, in one case, there were several references to mental capacity assessment in the Healthcare Trust's records. It indicated some fluctuation in the adult's mental capacity. However, the adult was able to discharge herself from hospital when she was assessed as having capacity. The Mental Capacity Act is often found to be an area for improvement, but it's encouraging that the audits identifies some good practice in this area. There was evidence of agencies working well within their own organisational boundaries. For example, encouragement for adults to engage with alcohol services, although the adult was reluctant to do so, and medical support being given to manage pain. There was some evidence of multidisciplinary team meetings being held and of making safeguarding personal. So, for example, in one case, there was evidence of good multi-agency working by the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, or MASH. There was clear, comprehensive recording and decision-making by the MASH. Decisions were relevant and proportionate, with a timely response, with partner agency checks undertaken. The adult was contacted, his views sought, and support offered. And the case records were excellent. For example, they were very clear and captured the action that was taken and decisions that were made. There are also recurring themes regarding areas for improvement, and they were multi-agency working was absent or insufficient. And this was sometimes expressed as needing to join up services or make use of multidisciplinary team meetings, and improving how the system works together and manages risks. For example, in one case, safeguarding concerns related to self-neglect could have been followed up, so the adult would be discharged from hospital to a safer environment, for example, by installing a community alarm and holding a multidisciplinary team meeting. Communication and information sharing was an area for improvement in 5 cases. It was apparent that agencies were sometimes not aware of important information held by their partners, and often it could have helped to develop a more effective approach. So, for example, in one case, an early referral to adult social care could have been made, and in another, the police were also not aware of fire risks. There were missed opportunities to prevent fire, identified in 4 cases. For example, a referral was made to the adult's GP in one case, but not to adult social care for a care and support assessment, and a referral to West Midlands Fire Service was not made in relation to fire risks. Early referral to West Midlands Fire Service was identified as an area for improvement in 3 cases and was linked to missed opportunities. You can find out more about the support that the Fire Service provides later in the webinar. And safeguarding referrals were an area for improvement in several cases. And sometimes this was about making a clear distinction between referrals for care and support assessment and safeguarding. But it was also about making earlier safeguarding referrals to adult social care. I think we might have just lost the presentation. I'll carry on whilst perhaps we can see if we can get it back up.
I'll pull it back up.
Okay, thank you. So it's also about making earlier safeguarding referrals to adult social care. And in one case, emergency services should have taken responsibility for making a safeguarding referral, but instead left it to one agency to do this. And the reason this is important is really to make sure that the referral is made and that no one assumes someone else will do this for them. Okay, still can't see the, oh, okay, we're back with the presentation. We'll just get that to the right slide and then we'll carry on. Okay. So the audit report makes 6 recommendations, and the 2 shown on this slide are for all agencies involved in the Black Country Safeguarding Adults Boards. But I think, as Kellyanne said earlier, I think they may equally apply to partnerships and agencies in other areas. So recommendation 1 is about multi-agency team meetings. And it says that all agencies must make sure their staff and teams understand the importance of multi-agency team meetings and the positive impact on managing risks and on outcomes that can be achieved as a result. They should be clear about their responsibilities to initiate multi-agency team meetings and how to do this. And just to make the point that anyone can initiate a multi-agency team meeting if they have a safeguarding concern about an adult with care and support needs. And recommendation 2 is about communication and information sharing. And again, agencies making sure their staff and teams understand the importance of communication and information sharing to manage risks effectively and achieve positive outcomes. I've included a link to the Social Care Institute for Excellence website in the slides, which has useful resource on safeguarding and information sharing. But you can also find similar information on your local Safeguarding Adults Board's websites. So recommendations 3 and 4 are about awareness and the application of West Midlands Fire Service's safety advice for professionals and carers. And I've added a link to this in the slides so you can access it. Recommendation 3 is really for the Black Country safeguarding partnerships to make sure that all agencies involved in their partnerships are aware of the safety advice. And recommendation 4 is about agencies making sure their staff understand and use the safety advice so that fire risks are managed to prevent injury and loss of life. And this includes making an early referral to West Midlands Fire Service to reduce fire risks. The recommendation 5 is about safeguarding referrals. And it says that all agencies must ensure that their staff understand the distinction between referrals for care and support assessment and those for a safeguarding inquiry, and also that their staff act on their responsibility to make a safeguarding referral and they make earlier referrals where appropriate. And the final recommendation is for Black Country Safeguarding Adults Boards to seek assurance from agencies on the actions they've taken to implement the recommendations. So this slide sets out some of the actions resulting from the audit and its recommendations. We hope that the audit report will help raise awareness of the audit's findings and the recommendations through the Safeguarding Adults Boards in the West Midlands region. Boards and agencies can develop their own action plans to implement the recommendations. So, for example, Walsall Safeguarding Adults Board has already discussed developing an action plan for Walsall. And today's event, it's a great opportunity to share the audit findings and promote good practice. It's excellent. We've got so many people participating today from across the region, and you can all play a part in promoting the fire service's safety advice for professionals and carers and encourage its use to prevent unnecessary fatalities and casualties from fire. So, for example, you can take it into your team meetings. And just to summarise, I've talked about the audits which identify strengths, good practice and areas of improvement. And we've made 6 recommendations for partnerships and agencies to consider and act on. Ultimately, the audit and recommendation are aimed at improving outcomes for people with care and support needs where there are fire risks. And an important note to end on, we need your help to raise awareness and share the audit report in your organisations, and also share the information that Sue and Beth will present in the next part of the webinar. I hope you found the presentation useful, and please do stay in the webinar because the next section has a lot of practical information and guidance for you to use. I think Lisa has been looking at your questions and comments in the chat. Lisa, are there any sort of questions or comments you'd like to share?
There's just one that's popped up around consent to refer if it's not granted, but Andrea's just helpfully commented that it'll be covered in the next session. So that's a nice link to the next session. I don't think there's any other questions at this stage.
Okay, thank you, Mike, for your presentation. So we're now going to hand you over to Beth and Sue, who are going to lead you through how you can help prevent service users dying or getting injured in a house fire.
So, good morning, everyone. Just to introduce myself, I'm Beth Curran and I'm a Partnerships and Vulnerability Support Officer at West Midlands Fire Service. And myself and my colleague Sue will be taking you through a presentation today on fire prevention in the home. So in the top right of the screen, there's a short pre and post evaluation, which is about 5 questions. If I give you a couple of moments, if you could scan and open the questionnaire and just have a look at filling out the first couple of questions, that would be really helpful for us. And once you've done that, I will start going through the aims and objectives of the session. Okay. So the overall aim of this session is that you'll be aware how to identify, assess and promote the safety and well-being of service users at risk of a fire, fire death or serious injury. And the objectives are to recognise the individuals that are at risk of harm due to fire, identify what actions we can take to reduce the risk of death or serious injury from fire, recognise your role in the prevention of fires, and have a clear understanding of the cases and learning following reviews. Before I continue, I just want to mention that if you find any of the information or images in this PowerPoint triggering, please feel free to take a break away from the presentation. So just to begin, I'm going to play a quick video which shows you how quickly and easily fire can spread and the damage it can cause in a short space of time. Keep an eye on the clock in the right hand corner and think about it in the context of someone raising the alarms. Also, if someone decided to tackle this fire themselves and went to find something to smother the fire, how long that may take and how much the fire may have spread in that time.
Hi everybody. I know you weren't expecting to see me. Can you hear me? I'm Kate Alice from West Midlands Fire Service. Beth's just had a technical problem in that her laptop has just shut down and told her that she's got an error. So, Sue, are you able to take over at all from Beth, or do you want me to try and do the presentation?
Hi, Kate. I shall do my best.
I'll be here to help.
Thank you. Can we get the presentation up again?
Yes, it's just coming up there with me.
If you need.
Technical problems, eh? Technical problems.
Right, so I just take control, don't I?
Yes, that's fine.
Right, so okay, let's just get to where we need to be. Sorry about this, everybody. It can't be helped when
You can't, and I think
the technology lets us down.
I think from that video, it just gives us all a really good idea of how quickly a fire can spread. And as Beth said at the very beginning of the video, to keep an eye on that clock. And it was just a matter of minutes before the whole room was engulfed. And somebody thinking that they might run down to the kitchen or to another room or get a bucket first and then try and tackle the fire themselves. By the time they've got back in that room, they would more than likely be overcome by smoke. And I think we do touch on that with some of the images that we've got later on in the presentation.
Yeah, so just to move on from that, this slide shows some data over the past few years about the numbers of accidental dwelling fires that we've had across the West Midlands, and you can see that they are from 2016 to 17 going up to 2020 2021. They're around about the same sort of numbers across the West Midlands. You'll be able to see the actual numbers when the actual presentation comes through. So when we talk about fire in the home, we look at two cohorts: those at most at risk of having a fire and those who are most at risk of dying in a fire. So if we talk about those who are first most at risk of having a fire, we talk about single occupancy, somebody that's not working or has been long-term unemployed, somebody or a household that's in a high area of multiple deprivation, newly arrived communities and single parents. And that has come from our serious incident review data, which Michael touched on earlier. And we will be talking about serious incident reviews a bit further on in the presentation. And then we talk about those who may be most at risk of dying in a fire. And we look at people aged 45 and over, smokers, people who may have mobility issues or mental health issues, people who are living alone, people who may have alcohol or substance misuse issues, and then people with no working smoke alarms. And as I say, that is based on our SIR data. Sometimes we get challenged on the single parent element of the cohorts. And single parents, we talk about people that may be distracted. So if you can imagine, and if we put it into the current situation where the cost of living crisis, where we may be facing power outages in some areas between 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the evening, that time is our time where we are most busy as an organisation. So if you can imagine a single parent, maybe lighting the house with candles, children running around bored because there's no TV, we can see why a single parent may be more at risk. And in a normal situation, it could be that they're cooking and they've got children running around who distract them, so they leave the cooking, and it could be the same with ironing, etc. So that's why the single parent element is included in the cohort.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. I don't know what happened. My laptop completely shut down. Hopefully it won't happen again. So thank you, Sue, for jumping in.
You're welcome.
Okay, so moving on to environmental risk. There are a couple of pictures here which demonstrate some of the environmental risks with fire. Before I talk about them, I'll just give you a couple of seconds to look over them all and have a think about what you think those risks might be. Okay, so in the top left, we have overloaded plug sockets, moving down to the use and storage of medical oxygen and the unsafe use of candles. In the middle, we have some hoarding or disorganised living, and then no working smoke alarms and unsafe wiring. Cooking or using a chip or fat pan, and finally, portable heaters too close to an ignition source, in this case being the sofa. This and the use of candles is something that we may see an increase in following the cost of living crisis. So just a few more to add from this page, such as the unsafe use of electric blankets, devices being left on, blocked or cluttered exits preventing the ability to evacuate, and having missing doors inside the property, which will increase the rate that a fire can spread. So having a door closed if there is a fire can give you 30 to 60 minutes of time before the fire that enters that room, dependent on the grading of that door. So looking at hoarding and disorganised living, we come across quite a few hoarded properties from the Safe and Well visits that we provide across the West Midlands. We do have complex needs officers, which Sue will touch on a bit later, but they may get involved, support the occupier around fire risk and make referrals out to other organisations on their behalf. Always refer to your local authority's hoarding framework. As this presentation will be shared, we've added a few links to a couple of the frameworks on the slide there. Some of the risks from disorganised living are trouble with access and egress in case of a fire, not only for the occupier, but for the fire service and any other agencies who may visit and enter that property. If they're collecting lots of combustible materials, it's an increased fuel source for the fire. And we're also currently investigating the use of virtual reality to support hoarders and agencies who support hoarders. Here's an example of a clutter rating image or a clutter rating scale. This one is looking at the living room. So the top three images show low risk, where doors, windows and stairways are accessible. Any clutter only obstructs some of the function of the living room and it's clean and maintained. The middle three images are medium risk, so some exits may be blocked. There may be a light infestation of pests. Clutter could be obstructing the key living spaces and cleaning may not be maintained, so there could be odours or soiled dishes. You may also see evidence of burns in the carpet or clothing. The bottom three images show a high risk where rooms are blocked and inaccessible. Utilities may be cut off. There could be a heavy infestation of pests. It's very unsanitary and there may be urine or faeces in the property. And you may also see evidence of previous fires. The clutter rating scale is used nationally, so when we're talking about a property or making a referral, it's really useful to use these images to gauge and relay the level of clutter that's in that property. So now we're going to look at some personal risk. Again, I'll give you a few seconds just to look at the images and see if you can identify what these personal risks may be. So in the top left, we have deaf or hearing impairments, moving down to living alone or social isolation, then mobility issues or physical impairments. We then have alcohol and substance abuse, smoking, which can be in bed, careless disposal, or around the use of medical oxygen. They also might have use of an airflow mattress, and if they smoke in bed, this increases the ignition risk of the mattress if the mattress is breached. And finally, in the top right, we have the effects from prescribed medication. Again, to add to those, we have dementia, mental health issues, learning disabilities, sensory loss, signs of previous fires, and finally emollient creams. This is a risk that quite often most people don't consider, but when emollient creams are used, they may build up on clothing and bedding, and this increases the ignition risk, especially if that person smokes and drops a cigarette. Another risk which isn't listed may be the storage of incontinence pads, which can vastly increase the spread of the fire. So now I'm going to hand you back over to Sue, who's going to take you through safe and well visits and what the fire service can provide.
Thank you, Beth. The rookie error there, I was on mute. So Beth's talked about some of the environmental and the risks around a fire in the home. So what can we offer as West Midlands Fire Service to try and reduce that risk? So one of the services we offer are safe and well visits, and they are aimed to reduce fire risk in the home, the risk of death or injury from fire. They also look at reducing risks of death and injury on the roads. They identify health and care needs. And what we try to do is empower and motivate people to make positive changes regarding their health, well-being and fire safety. So the safe and well visits are an important part of our prevention activity because they enable us to advise and educate on safety in the home, with a particular focus on the most vulnerable residents. They are carried out by our operational firefighters, and we know that there are strong links between the health, well-being and lifestyle choices and the risk of fire. So this is why the residents' permission, we cover a range of topics, and they would include smoking, alcohol, medication and drugs, mental health and dementia, mobility, including slips, trips and falls, hoarding, loneliness and social isolation, healthy eating and lifestyles, home security and road safety. And what we do when we've completed our safe and well visits, we will leave a safe and well booklet, and the booklet is available to download from our website. And what we will do is we will note the pages for the resident where the advice that they need can be found. It's quite a hefty document, but it does cover a range of topics. So we offer those safe and well visits. And what we also do is we can provide equipment to mitigate the risks of fires in the home. So what you're seeing there is a selection of some of the equipment that we can offer. So smoke alarms. We also offer a hearing impaired alarm for those that are hard of hearing. We offer fire retardant equipment, including throws, bedding. We can also offer a fire retardant apron. And those fire retardant aprons are really good if somebody's got low mobility and is a smoker. If the cigarette is dropped, the cigarette will go out. And then we can offer, guidance on if you've got a heavy smoker who may be in a hoarded property with mobility issues, using a bucket with sand to put those those cigarettes out in a safe way. I don't know if there's anyone here from outside the West Midlands, but the equipment may differ for each fire and rescue service, but that is just a selection of some of the equipment that we can offer. And then we can sort of make referrals. There's equipment that is available from other agencies that can help reduce the risk of fire. So on, I won't say on the left or the right because you'll probably see it the opposite way around to me. So we've got locking cooker valves, which are available from Cadent. So one of the cases that we had was that there was an elderly person who was living with dementia, but they were still fiercely independent and they wanted to keep cooking their own food. But it was unsafe for them to cook unsupervised in case they left the gas on. So Cadent were contacted and they were able to fit the locking cooker valve, which made it possible for that person to still be able to cook in a supervised way and in a safe way, because when they were alone, the gas was shut off. And then we've got the various telecare systems, which are normally offered through the local authorities. And there are various different elements to the packages, and one of them includes a linked smoke alarm. But again, what is offered will depend on the package that the local authority has procured. So moving on now, Beth mentioned earlier about the complex needs officers that we have within West Midlands Fire Service. These officers, again, are normally operational firefighters, but they've undertaken more training to be able to work with those that are more vulnerable and have a greater risk of fire. And they will provide interventions to deliver safety to those that are deemed as highly vulnerable. And they will normally work with those individuals for a prolonged period of time, carrying out a number of visits. They will also, when necessary, take part in any of the multi-disciplinary team meetings about an individual to share their information about that individual. They will also engage with partners, carers and other stakeholders around that vulnerable person, and mainly in the main they will carry out joint visits. So a number of our complex needs officers will regularly visit with housing officers or other officers from other agencies, and the CNOs, as we call them, they do deal with a number of hoarding cases. Other teams that we've got include a deaf team. They are trained in British Sign Language, so they are able to go out and provide a safe and well visit and provide advice for those people that are hard of hearing and profoundly deaf. Okay, moving on. We do have something for young people as well. So this is called fire safety tutoring, and this is for young people and children aged up to 25 years old if they have an additional needs, but aged up to 18 normally. And this is a service if a young person is showing an unhealthy interest in fire. And when we go in, if there are signs of burns and stuff on furniture, windowsills, bedding, etc., we will make a referral to our team, our fire safety tutoring team. But you also can make a referral to the team if you feel that it would be useful for a young person to have that fire safety tutoring. And the contact is included on the slide, and that's our youth services, and you'll be able to see that and get that information when you receive the presentation. So going back to talking about our safe and well visits, there are a number of ways that you can refer to West Midlands Fire Service for a safe and well visit. Hopefully a number of you are already referring to us, and you probably are using our standard referral form, which will include a partner reference number pre-populated in the top right hand corner. We also have an online referral form, and the link is there, and that allows you to directly refer through our website. What we can also provide is a QR code, which will hopefully be more successful than the evaluation QR code. The QR code will actually include your reference number, your unique reference number. And when you scan it, it will take you directly to the website, so you are able to refer online. And then there is something that we have recently introduced on our website, which is for the general public and is in line with the NFCC, which is a Safe Links referral. And what this does, the user will go in and answer some questions, and they will then be provided with an action plan, a personalised action plan. Now, if their risk score comes up as risky, shall we say, it is referred to us as a fire service, and then we will make contact with that individual, provided they have actually shared their contact details with us. If you are using the online referral form and you don't have a reference number, you can contact us in the partnership team, and we'll be able to let you know what your reference number is. And it's useful because that allows us to give you information about how many referrals you are making, and also, you know, to give you some outcomes of how many may have been referred but have then subsequently been cancelled. So if you haven't got your tracks or your unique partnership reference number, please contact us on the email address on the slide with your information, and we'll be able to give you your ID number. That hopefully is the form that you're using. That hopefully is familiar to you. The form has been reviewed a number of times. This is the current form. It is essential that you provide all the information on there, including all the risk information, and it does also provide you with some choices when is the most suitable day and time for a visit to be carried out, and wherever possible, when we contact the individual, we will try and you know, get the visit in the most suitable time for them. And on the back of the form, it gives you the guidance of how to fill the form in. So hopefully you're all familiar with that. So we've talked about some of the joint visits that the complex needs officers do. So those joint visits, having someone there to witness the visit can reinforce the safety messages beyond the visit, and can make all the difference, especially if there are significant risks and vulnerabilities, or if there's been issues around capacity or engagement. So a joint visit, as I said, a number of our complex needs officers will make joint visits with representatives from different organisations, or it could be a consenting family member, friend or carer. And to arrange the joint visit, just add the person's details into the comment section of the form, and we can then therefore arrange the joint visit. And that just gives you an idea So, you know, you tick the joint visits required and add the various information as directed on that form. And you can also do that online via the comments as well. We can provide a poster similar to this that you can put up, and this is just an example. You can put up in various staff rooms, etc., if need be, where people can just scan that QR code, and as I say, it will take them direct to the West Midlands Fire Service website, where they can input all the details of the individual that requires the safe and well visit. So, as I said, we can provide information and feedback on the outcomes of our safe and well visits, which refer to the fire risk, and you can do that through our email address that's on the screen, which is the same that was on the other slide. And we can provide that information, providing that the consent, that the person has given us the consent to share that information. And going forward, I mean, this gives us the opportunity to talk about how our systems are going to work in the future, where we're going to be working more automated system, and whereby we can consider membership, which will give you greater access to information from the outcomes of the safe and well visits. So if you do become a member and join up with our safe and well membership, there will be governance arrangements that we will sit down and we will discuss, and we will draft out an agreement. We'll have an information sharing agreement, and that will allow us to actually share information with you on a quarterly basis. You may want it more regularly at the beginning, which we're able to consider, but this is in preparation for our new systems. When we talk about the membership, when the new systems are introduced, your organisation will be given a risk score, so you won't have to complete all of the information on the form at the moment, because your users, based on the data that we have, will have already been given a risk score. So it makes the process a little bit quicker and slicker for you. So then we move on to consent, which I may need a little bit of support on, Kate, if you're there. But West Midlands Fire Service do not need consent to receive or process data from referrals. It's always great if you have consent, because that shows that somebody is willing to engage with us. Our prevention activities are a public task which is carried out in the public interest, and the information shared allows us to exercise our function as a fire and rescue authority, which is outlined in section 6 and 11 of the Fire and Rescue Services Act of 2004. We have recently updated our privacy notice as well about revisits, and dependent on the risk identified and the person's needs, we may use that information to recontact somebody to schedule further appointments. So carrying on there with the consent, the guidance is from the Social Care Institute for Excellence. The risk of sharing information is often perceived higher than it actually is, and you should consider the risks of not sharing the information. And when we talk about, in looking back to Michael's slides around the safeguarding, would it be better to share that information in order to prevent a fire, death or serious injury. However, what we do say is if you are unsure, that you should contact your own data and information governance teams, but do consider, you know, what the outcome can be if you don't share the information with us. Is there anything that you need to add there, Kate?
I don't think so. I know that I think you've covered it really well, Sue. Andrea has just put a note in the comments from Rach and Deborah, and she's just asking whether or not their query has been answered, and I've just been busy doing something else, so I've missed the question. So if they could just confirm that they've had that question answered, if you don't mind. But no, I think you've covered it all pretty much. Yeah, and Rach has just come back to say yes, you've answered the question. I think data sharing and consent is a very tricky thing for all of us as partners. When can we share and when can't we share? But I think you've covered it all off there with the legal basis for sharing that information and keeping people safe. So thanks, Sue.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our serious incident reviews, which Michael touched on in his presentation. And we will trigger a serious incident review for any fire fatality, any injury that is likely to result in a fire fatality, any incident that has involved a person over 70 with significant smoke inhalation, an incident that involves children with burns or significant smoke inhalation, or any other incident that we feel that there'll be some learning from, and we feel that a serious incident review would be beneficial. Again, we do it under Section 6 and 11 of the Fire and Rescue Services Act of 2004. And the serious incident review gives us the opportunity to learn from incidents, and hopefully from that learning and the recommendations that we implement, we can then prevent further similar incidents from occurring. There could be internal learning, so it would be something we may have an internal SIR where we believe there's something that us as a service can learn, or there could be some external learning whereby we will have a multi-agency meeting and we will go through the incident and the case and identify the learnings for each agency. What I must say here, it is nothing about apportioning a blame in any way, shape or form. It is about the learning opportunities. We do conduct serious incident reviews on living casualties if there's learning, as well as any fatalities. They are similar to an SAR, but they're a serious incident review that we do as a fire service and will involve the relevant partners. Having said that, some of our incidents do and are referred for SARs. And there you can see an infographic which shows incidents across the West Midlands between 2016 and 2021. And it gives you some of the causes. So some of the causes: cooking, smoking, faulty electrical equipment, ignition by a naked flame, deliberate and people being too close to a source of the ignition. And that underpins the content that we've included previously in this presentation. One of the things that I think is really good to highlight there, that 34% of those 169 incidents that were subject to an SIR, 34% of those people had a care package. The accommodation is virtually 50-50 we don't always find out whether they're rented or owner occupied. That's why there's a bit of a anomaly, but we're finding that, you know, at the moment it's about 50-50 around the accommodation status. And those circumstances, there were people that were living alone, hoarding, in receipt of care, known services, had alcohol or substance misuse as a factor, and were some people there were using medical oxygen as well. So that's a useful infographic. We do update these on a regular basis, and we find that partners quite like these infographics and often display them in offices and in you know, sort of areas that your staff may use, like canteens or something, just as a reminder, because it's useful seeing them in that diagram or infographic sort of status, with those numbers and those factors. So you will get this presentation, but if you would like a copy of our most recent SIR infographic, you can contact us and we will be able to provide that for you. Right, so that kind of finishes the presentation part of it. We will be moving on to the case studies. We've got 3 case studies that we're going to do an overview for you. Going to sort of just give you an overview of the case. We'll discuss the risks and then we'll tell you what happened. When we do this in a more interactive way, we sort of split you up into groups, but because there's so many of you, we're unable to do that in this situation. So before we move on to those case studies, are there any questions that we need to be answering that have been highlighted in the chat?
I think the majority of the questions have been answered by Andrea and various of the partners. I think there was a general question around how the learning is shared across age from SIRs, and I think Andrea's answered that. I think, yeah, I think there's pretty much everything's been answered. So thanks, Andrea, for keeping an eye on the chat as well.
Thank you, Andrea. So myself and Beth are going to take you through some of the case studies. Okay, so moving on, the first case study, Mr. A had moved into housing with care. He'd had 2 hospital admissions and he moved into housing with care following these admissions. He's got very limited mobility and he struggles with his personal care. He does enjoy alcohol and he smokes hand-rolled cigarettes. He has impaired cognitive ability, but that has improved since he has reduced his alcohol intake. He has the support of his son, and he is also in receipt of 6 care calls per day. In the last 2 months, Mr. A had experienced 2 small fires, one of which resulted in a burn to his thigh. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to just think about that, and think about what would you do as an organisation if that was your resident or you were involved with that person, that individual, and then we'll go on and we'll discuss what happened to Mr. A. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to have a think about that. Yeah, Andrea's just put in the chat. These are all real cases that we've experienced in the West Midlands. So we haven't made them up. These are actual cases that we have had. Right, so Mr. A was conveyed to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham by West Midlands Ambulance. He remained there until he passed away, sadly, following an accidental dwelling fire in his flat. He had got 45% burns recorded and sepsis. The fire investigation concluded that the fire was caused by Mr. A smoking a hand-rolled cigarette that had been rolled too loosely, which caused the lighted tobacco to fall from it, and that resulted in the fire and Mr. A's burns. As a service, West Midlands Fire Service were not aware of the 2 previous fires that Mr. A had had before the incident in which he lost his life. As a result of the fires not being reported and the injuries sustained to Mr. A's thigh, a safeguarding referral was made by West Midlands Fire Service, and it was upheld as neglect. The carers believed that they had referred Mr. A as a result of the near misses. However, West Midlands Fire Service had not received a referral. One of the things with this case is that as a result of that last point, the carers had believed they'd received, or they believed they'd referred Mr. A, but we had not received it. One of the outcomes, the learning outcomes for West Midlands Fire Service, was that we would always acknowledge receipt of referrals. So when a referral is sent into our Home Safety Centre, you will get an acknowledgement to say that it has been received and it will be processed. So that was one of the learning outcomes that came from that case that we implemented internally. Okay, Beth, do you want to go through Mrs. Z? And if you have got any questions on any of the case studies, just pop them in the chat and we'll try and answer them. And we'll talk about after the case studies who we might invite to some of the serious incident review meetings that we have around learning.
Right, so looking at Mrs. Z, so she lived in a property managed by the G4S section under Section 4 of the Immigration Act. She had a small group of local friends and people from church. She had a stroke that limited her mobility and speech. She liked to be independent, but her type 2 diabetes is managed by the district nurses who administer her insulin, and she accepts this but will often refuse care calls when they interfere with her independence. She receives 3 calls for care and support a day and help with personal care, medication support, meal preparation and cleaning. She had a high blood pressure that was controlled by medication and later diagnosed with either having a vascular cognitive impairment or early onset vascular dementia. Carers noticed burn marks on the kitchen lino, and she was supported by adult social care, occupational therapists, district nurses, domiciliary care and Alzheimer's UK. So again, I'll just give you a couple of minutes just to have a look and think about what you might have done if you came across this situation. Okay, so what happened to Mrs. Z? Earlier this year, Mrs. Z decided that she would only accept care from Monday to Friday and wanted to cancel care over the weekend. The care provider agreed to temporarily cease all care for the weekend, pending a review meeting with the social care, which was due to take place on the Tuesday of the following week with Mrs. Z. 2 days before this meeting, West Midlands Fire Service attended a house fire at Mrs. Z's address. and the cause of which was believed to be a chip pan fire, which Mrs. Z tried to extinguish with water. Mrs. Z passed away because of the injuries that she sustained in this fire. She had been in the UK since 2003. During her time in the UK, she received support from many agencies, statutory and non-statutory, despite having no resource to public funds. With the support of an advocate, a human rights assessment had been completed, which concluded that it would be a breach of her human rights should the support not be provided. It's important to note that despite Miss Z cancelling her care, her social worker didn't give up and kept working with Mrs. Z to find ways to continue the care in ways which worked for her and didn't interfere with her church commitments in a way which meant that her wishes around independence were met. So I think this is an example of a case where the agencies were trying to do all that they could. They were constantly engaging with Mrs. Z, and they didn't want to just stop and leave her without care. I don't know, Sue, do you know any more about this case? Sorry, you're having a drink.
Whilst I was having a drink there. I don't actually, apologies, but it is, Andrea will probably know some more about this case. It might have been in somewhere she was covering.
Yeah, so this is a really sad case, because the people who were supporting Mrs. Z were working really hard in really challenging circumstances, particularly around her leave to remain and her status while she was living here in the UK. It's just really unfortunate that they missed the warning signs around her fire risk, because they were doing a fantastic job, and that's why we've recognised this in the case study, because we're talking about things that don't go well. We also wanted the case studies to recognise things that are going well, but just unfortunately they missed the warning signs, predominantly linked to her stroke and the impact that had on her ability to do things like cook independently and safely.
Thank you, Andrea. So, do you want to jump over for the last one?
I can do. So the last one is Mrs. E. Mrs. E was 40 years old. She'd got a very close family network, which included her mother, her brother, and her daughters, who were 17 and 18 years old. Mrs. E had a degenerative neurological condition affecting her cognition, her memory function, behaviour, and mobility. She was actually unable to weight bear. She was living in an adapted bungalow with living carers who provided 22 hours care per day. Mrs. E spends most of the other 2 hours a day in a wheelchair with the TV on and cigarettes, and she has a lighter and a TV remote control to hand. She enjoys her independence and wishes to remain at home, although her manual dexterity, her coordination and her speech are deteriorating. So again, we'll just let you have a look, think about that, and then we'll go on to say what happened to Mrs. E, and then we'll just go on to just give a little bit of an overview of who we might invite to an SIR meeting and how we determine who to invite. Okay then, so what happened to Mrs. E, she was fiercely independent. She knew her own mind, and her mother had sourced the care through a direct payment. She had had a capacity assessment in respect of managing finances and was deemed not to have capacity. There was no capacity assessment in respect of smoking risk. There was a risk assessment by the care agency which rightly identified the risks to the carers, and it specified that they should leave the room when Mrs. E was smoking. However, this assessment did not consider or document how to enable her to smoke safely. Mrs. E died in a fire that occurred in the 2 hours where her carers were not there. She dropped a cigarette into her lap, and as she was in a wheelchair, she was unable to raise the alarm or evacuate. So again, a very, very sad case. And, you know, everything had been done where possible to keep Mrs. E safe and independent in the home. Carers had been employed, but again, what happened was that smoking risk was not identified. When we talked earlier in the presentation about some of the equipment that we can provide, we talked about a smoking apron. Had Mrs. E had a smoking apron, perhaps that incident could have been avoided. Is there anything to add to that incident, Andrea or Beth or Kate?
I don't think there is.
Andrea?
I don't think there is, other than to say all 3 case studies are very much focused on smoking, and there is a real reason for that, because it's very difficult to start a fire with a cigarette unless there's emollient creams associated with the fire. But a fire that is started through smoking is the fire that is most likely to seriously injure or cause the death of the person involved in the incident. And that is the reason why we focused the case studies very much on smoking, because they are the fires that cause the most injury and the most death.
Thank you. So just to talk about the SIR process. When we do trigger an SIR as an organisation, we will scope that incident. So we will go out and arrange partners what contact they had with that individual that was involved in the incident. When the information comes back to us, we will make a timeline up and we will look at the information that we've got, and then we will invite the relevant partners to participate in the actual SIR review meeting. So if we look back to and taking into consideration some of these case studies, you know, who would we have invited to some of these case studies? If I go back and see, I don't know if this is going to work. So with Mr. A, he was in housing with care. So, you know, as part of our scoping, we would have contacted housing with care. We would have invited them to participate in the actual SIR meeting. If a person has been involved, is receiving support from adult social care, we will invite adult social care. If they're in a local authority housing, we'd invite a housing officer if they'd been involved. Excuse me, one moment. In some cases, you know, we'll have a GP there. If there's been hospital admissions, we might have a representative from the hospital. So it is a real multi-agency meeting that takes place that the learning that we can get all the learning from, and that is how we will then, with that learning, we will then produce a report and recommendations, which will then be anonymised and distributed. So they'll go through to the various safeguarding boards if necessary. They'll go back to the partners, but it is something we sort of disseminate far and wide, some of those learning outcomes that we have from an SIR process. Beth, Andrea, anybody, Kate, is there anything you want to add?
Not
Andrea?
from this, not from me, Sue. I'm hoping that it's generated lots of questions and lots of thoughts, and that people in the call are even possibly identifying people that you are working with and supporting. But I'll let Sue and Beth carry on with the remaining few slides, and we might have some time at the end to come back to some of the things that have been shared.
Thanks, Andrea.
If I could just jump in, so the only thing I would reiterate is something you've already said, that it's not apportioning blame. It's to try and do the positive thing and identify what we can do better for somebody who might be involved in a similar incident in future. So it's changing what we do now to improve the outcomes for people, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely, Kate, and ultimately this is what the slide that's up there now, this is what we want to avoid. We want to, wherever possible, stop that incident happening in the first place, and we can do that by recognising the risk and referring service users for a safe and well visit if required, and just that you know, those to me are quite harrowing pictures. So you know, we don't, it's the last thing that we would want to see happen to any of our service users. I think we'd all agree. So just look out for those risks and, you know, refer when necessary, and we will do all we can. Beth, is there anything you want to add there before we ask if anyone's got any questions?
No, I think that's great. So I think the only thing, if we hop over to the next page, there's a couple of resources which are available to everyone. So we've got an e-learn at the minute, which you can share with your team, and it does give you a certificate at the end of it. There's also lots of information on our Home Safety Centre page, the work that we do with schools and education, and our educational safe side building. So all of these are links onto this PowerPoint. So afterwards, when it's all shared out, hopefully you can go through and have a look at some of these resources.
Well, I was just going to pop in the chat. We just got some tips and some information on our website around the cost of living crisis, and so I'll put that link in the chat for you. And just to say that what we will be doing is releasing some resources for partners around the cost of living. There's going to be sort of an online presentation and a partner briefing, which sort of outlines some of the risks that could be associated with the cost of living crisis, and where you can obtain sort of safety information and some alternative solutions as well. And what we will be doing is we will be sharing pertinent messages from other agencies through our comms department, and they'll be using a social media campaign to do that.
Can I just jump in, Sue, please? Just as another comment on the cost of living and the winter warmth, is that we are doing some analysis on the data at the moment. It's very early to see what impact the cost of living crisis is having, but we are sure that people are going to be changing their behaviours because they can't afford to put the heating on. So they may be heating their home in a less safe way or a more dangerous way. So we are going to be looking at the data that we get, the incident data, to see what changes are happening, and just to see how we can work with partners to keep people safe through the next very cold months and expensive months. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you. So that concludes our presentation around the fire risks and how to refer to us. So we have got some time. If there is any questions or anything you want to ask any of us, just pop anything in the chat bar.
So there was one question that was quite interesting, which was around regarding refusal or cancellation in care. What should have happened instead of cancelling care visits? A couple of people have asked that question.
Andrea or Kate, do you want to come in on that for me, please?
So is that a question specifically for us as a service, or is it kind of a question more to us as a group of professionals across agencies about what happens when we have people like Mrs. Z who want to change or cancel the care and support that they have in place? I don't think it takes away or negates the need to make a referral if fire risk has been identified, but it certainly proposes wider risks and wider questions, I would suspect, around the person being able to continue to be independent, or, you know, to have medical care, personal needs care. So I suppose I looked at that maybe as a more general question for us all to consider, rather than just specifically related to fire. But the person who asked the question, who's on the call, may be able to give. I think
it was Rach Balvinder.
Hi everyone. Yes, Balvinder here. Yeah, it is a wider question, because we come across this so much, and I think what Alicia said earlier about autonomy and choice and giving that people the right to have care as they wish and choose. But then it's a sad case that you just shared, and it just dawned on me. I thought, oh my God, we get so much of this. What could have we done in those scenarios, in that situation? And you know, and I'm just now worried about, you know, there's a likelihood of something like that happening in the future. If somebody says, no, I can manage, I can only have so many calls, and you want to engage, you want them, keep them engaging with you, and so to some extent you compromise, and through this compromise we've resulted in a sad situation. So I'm really looking for tips and ideas how to handle such a situation, if that makes sense.
It does. Shall I come back in while I'm still got my camera on? And it's always tricky, isn't it? Because when we do these sorts of things, it makes it all sound really easy, doesn't it? Yeah, you just make a referral to West Midlands Fire Service. But maybe in Mrs. Z's case, had the professionals and the people supporting her recognise that risk, we may have done the visit. We may have put may have made her safe, which may have been able to contribute to the kind of the less restrictive approach to her care and support. We may have been able to engage with the people working with her, both professionals and you know, her informal support network, to try and make a difference in a way that worked for her, kept her safe, provided her with the support she needed. But it's really challenging. I can see, Deb, you've got your camera on and you've got your hand up. Don't know whether you want to come in at this point.
Yeah, if that's okay, Andrea. Hello everyone, fabulous information, by the way, thank you all. I just wanted to add to that. I suppose the thing that struck me was the care in that scenario was cancelled just prior to a review, which didn't feel quite right. I know it's not easy, but where we can get people together to at least look at the risk and balance choice, then I'd say that's really key, and the review mechanism offers us the opportunity to do that where possible. But it is about a balance, and I recognise it's really easy to say stuff in this space and practice is different, but it's about that balance between choice, control and autonomy and risk, and being clear about those risks and how best to mitigate them where we can.
Thanks, Deb.
Okay, some of the other questions that we had throughout the chat were around consent, which we answered. You answered for us around the fire service has a lawful basis for processing risk information. However, we encourage that consent is sought because this enables engagement for those adults. Some of the questions as well, I mean, I won't go through them all because we are going to provide a fact sheet, but some of the key questions were around the support that's offered for hoarding, and it was responded to that the fire service can help in those circumstances, and there's some contact details that will be shared. There was a couple of questions around how the learning is shared from SRIs, and it'd be useful for us to have sight of those from partnership to partnership so that we can embed that learning from a partnership point of view. I think Andrea's looking at how that's going to be shared far and wide. There was some queries around how we're promoting the fire safety messages, and there's some been helpful links in the chat again, and we'll provide them on the information sheet. And then there was some queries around whether the SRI is a single agency, and that was covered in the report by Beth and Sue. And then finally, there was a query around ICT systems and having an algorithm so that they can link and share information, which would then be able to alert agencies in real time. And there's a discussion that's going to be taken offline. Andrea's happy to pick up a discussion. So in terms of questions, they were pretty much covered in the chat. I don't know if there are any additional questions that anybody wants to ask at this stage.
There was a question asked, Lisa, and I can't find it in the chat now, about whether referring online gives a confirmation that the referral's been made. And as we've been going through the session, I've done a test online referral, and you will get an email to tell you that you've made the referral. So I couldn't find the person and the question in the chat, so I just thought I'd pop it here, but we will pop it in the FAQs too.
Can't find it either, looking quickly. Excellent, and everything will be shared today in terms of the PowerPoint presentation, as well as the Q&A session.
Hi. Thank you very much. So I think that concludes our webinar today. I'd just like to say and express my thanks to all our speakers who have taken the time to be with us. So a huge thank you to Michael, Sue and Beth and Kate jumping in at the last moment when there's technical issues. And also a big thank you to Lisa for collating those questions and supporting with and monitoring the chat function. And a really big thank you to everybody who has registered and been here today with us. We will be sending out the PowerPoint, the full audit report, a Q&A sheet, and then when the recording's ready, we'll be sending that over to the different partnerships as well, where they might want to pop it on their websites. So just want to say a big thank you to everybody, and we hope you have the rest of a good day. Thank you.